It's hot outside, but it's cool in here. So it's good to see everyone, particularly those of you who are not from Texas. Welcome to the Lone Star State. We hope you get some great Lone Star hospitality while you're here. You've had a lot of conversation today about geothermal and particularly about the Texas Geothermal Energy Alliance. We came together in the aftermath of Winter Storm Uri, which for those of you who weren't here, knocked out power for about 5 days for many Texans. And suddenly the idea that we need firm, dispatchable, 24/7 clean energy became front and center at the Texas Capitol. Since that time, with the help of the Mitchell Foundation and others, we've been able to create momentum here in Texas for geothermal energy. It really has become the unicorn, the silver bullet, whatever metaphor you want to use, for an energy resource that is firm, dispatchable, 24/7, unaffected by the weather at the surface. It's not that we're against anything else. We're for all the above and below. All the above and below. Thank you, Matt, for teeing that up earlier. Last session was our first legislative session as a geothermal trade group here in Texas. For those of you who don't know, the Texas legislature meets every other year for 140 days. Sounds like a good example that those in Washington might want to emulate. And with Chairman Darby's help, we were able to move some really important geothermal legislation forward. And now we're beginning to use that as a jumping off point for additional geothermal legislation so that we can play a critical role in Texas, keeping the Texas grid stable, reliable, and affordable and clean. So with that, I welcome with me to the stage Chairman Drew Darby. Thank you for coming, Chairman.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.
So, Chairman, you've been in the legislature for a while. You're now, once again, Chairman of the Energy Committee. You were there before, I think, back in 07, 09 timeframe.
It is actually the 15 and 17.
15, all right, 15, 17. So congratulations. Why don't you tell everyone what the Energy Resources Committee does and how the environment today for energy resource is different from the time you chaired it before.
Well, thank you, Barry. First of all, it's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon. This is not my first South by Southwest panel, but it's always good to be back. We wandered into the facility across the street. We figured out that that was not the geothermal place. So I kept asking my staff, I said, are you sure we're in the right place? Because we didn't see some friendly faces, but it's always good to be with you, Barry. I'm from West Texas, out in the Permian Basin. I represent 10 counties. I'm a 50-year oil and gas lawyer, water rights lawyer, and so I've grown up in the energy business. And as you can tell, I'm a kind of a meat and potatoes guy. I care about infrastructure, mostly potatoes, as you can also tell. But I am an all-the-above guy. I am certainly I'm familiar with the oil and gas technology in the industry, but I'm also familiar with what it needs to interact with all the various energy resources that this state is blessed with, not only land, but radiant heat, geothermal heat below the surface, brine in our produced water, and carbon capture, everything, nuclear, everything that relates to producing energy here in Texas, I think we need to embrace. We need to be proactive about that. And so as chairman of the Energy Resources Committee, I'm able to take and shepherd ideas through the process and advance our industry, this industry forward, and other industries that affect the daily lives of every Texan. I lived through Winter Storm Uri. I sent through almost 29 hours of testimony about what happened, why it happened, what put us in that position, and then we spent the next session, and actually every session that's followed, in trying to follow up and make sure we did the right thing, and we've accomplished our goal to make Texas grid safe, reliable, and affordable. So I noticed the previous speaker talked about our wind and solar. I was part of the legislative process when we built transmission lines at a cost of about $8 billion to West Texas and North Texas. When that happened, there was no generation at the end of it. And I can remember talking to David Swinford, who was the state representative from the Amarillo region. I said, David, let me get this straight. You think we ought to build $8 billion worth of transmission to a part of the state where we have no generation? He looked at me and said, Drew, if we build it, they will come. Well, there's never been a more profound statement than if we build it, they will come. We did build it. They did come. They've come in extraordinary numbers to where now we're proud to demonstrate for the whole world our commitment to wind, solar, other renewables that have dramatically altered the energy portfolio of the state. So as chairman of the Energy Resources, my job is to shepherd some of those policies through the process to make sure that they can be there to benefit Texans.
So you mentioned wind and solar. A lot of people here probably don't know, 20 years ago, wind was a rounding era here in Texas. We were getting less than 1% of our energy from wind. And I remember my first year on the PUC, I went out to one of the few wind farms in West Texas. It was out in Spur, Texas. They had no connectivity to the grid. The turbines were spinning, but the power wasn't going anywhere. And they said, Smitherman, if you can do anything about this, get us some transmission lines so we can move the wind from where it blows to where people live. And with your help and the help of others, we began that journey in 2005, and by 2013, we'd built 3,000 miles of 345 kV, and wind went from zero, essentially, to 25% of the energy last year. It's been said a couple times here today that during March, the last couple of weeks, we've had over 50, maybe 6% of the energy on the grid coming from wind and solar. And then solar came along, and now we have 30 gigawatts of installed solar, and that's helping for times when maybe the wind is not blowing as much. Your district is really unique in that for centuries people probably cussed the wind and the solar, and now they're using it. Why don't you talk a little bit, because you have everything in your day. You have oil and gas, you have wind, you have solar, you have a lot of sheep and goats. You've got every resource.
I do, especially sheep. But no, we're blessed. We don't have very pretty landscape, but that landscape lends itself well to not only solar farms, but certainly wind farms. And the challenge is to integrate all that together to make sure if we have the power to literally generate energy, then what do we do with it? How do we get it to market? One of the things we saw in Winter Storm Uri is we had parts of this state that were producing electricity, but we weren't able to get that electricity to where we needed for the load, especially in South Texas. There was offshore wind that was available, but we couldn't get it up to the load centers. Today, in our state, we have some 17 what they call GTCs, which is generic transmission constraints, which means effectively that we've got more generation than the lines and the infrastructure can handle at any one time. So the PUC and the ERCOT put a constraint on that line to say you can't overload this line and you must reduce production by a percentage. In the case of the West Texas GTC, it's about 15%, 85% of what they can actually produce. So at any one time, there's more power generation in that area that can get to where people can afford to pay for it. That reduces, two things happen because of that constraint. Number one, it makes electricity prices higher on the side of the constraint where they're limiting power. People who buy electricity pay more at that period, and people who are generating the electricity get paid less for what they're generating. So there's inefficiencies on both sides. It's about a $2 billion price tag in any one year. So the $2 billion figure tells me we've got to build infrastructure. We've either got to co-locate power generation where we have a load growth, or we need to make sure we have transmission that can get it to where we need the electricity.
Or both.
Or both.
And really,
it's really all the above.
It is. It's all the above, because we have 1,000 people moving to Texas every day. I think most of them are here in Austin right now as I try to get over here. But this is the place to be. As you know, ERCOT is projecting that our load growth will double over the next 5 years. So load growth, that's a fancy word for electricity demand. We're about an 85 gigawatt peak system. They're telling us it'll be 130 or 140. So we need everything if we're going to satisfy the population, all of these hyperscalers, AI, everything that is being talked about.
And we need a regulatory framework that allows those projects to move forward in a timely fashion. You know, that's part of the problem that we have is getting these projects to market is a long process. And so I think some of the good work you helped us with last session in trying to get the Railroad Commission approving geothermal projects, I think that time frame works a whole lot faster. And so we're looking forward to moving some of these projects forward.
Well, absolutely. And you talked about building transmission, and there's a Permian Basin transmission plan that's going forward. There are other phases of that. But one of the beauties of geothermal, and you've seen the map that shows where the hottest parts of Texas are, is we can actually locate geothermal close to the load centers. So we can put it close to San Antonio, Corpus, Houston, east side of Dallas. All those things will cut down on some of these congestion constraints that you've talked about. Last week I had the opportunity to be in Washington with DOE Secretary Chris Wright, great guy who comes out of the oil and gas industry, though he's made an investment in geothermal as well. And he talked about the Trump plan on drill, baby, drill, which we say in the geothermal world, that's great, we like that too. But that's not anything new here in Texas.
No, we drill. We turn to the right, as we say out in the oil field. Just keep turning to the right. It shows you're being successful. But the reality is geothermal is particularly well suited for the oil and gas industry because it's able to utilize, in some cases, abandoned holes or wells that are marginal. They can be deepened. They're located in an area that has geothermal possibilities. And so by using oil and gas drilling techniques, you're able to drill that well bore to accommodate a geothermal infrastructure. So I think that is particularly well suited.
It really is, and we heard the panel before with General Wizian from the Bureau of Economic Geology talk about the projects that are being worked on with the military, whether it's Joint Base Ellington outside of Houston, the Naval Air Station in Corpus, Fort Bliss out in El Paso, and maybe even a few others. The ability to have a power source inside the fence line, no wires coming in and out, no supply chain, no ability to influence the delivery of power is incredibly important. And I never thought about this, but General Wizian said, the thing about nuclear, and this is not throwing rocks at nuclear, but if you have a small nuclear reactor on a military base, that may be the first thing the enemy tries to take out, Target. So I'm like, that's a really interesting point. We ought to keep that in mind. But it is absolutely the case that we have a number of military bases, and the military needs what they say, they need 5 nines, right? 99.999% reliability. Talk just a little bit about a project which I think you're familiar with. You live in a rural, remote area, though parts of it are beautiful, like the Concho Valley. Presidio County, way out west, apparently has been talking to the Bureau of Economic Geology about geothermal and co-location with a hyperscaler in Presidio County. Now, these people may not know where that is, but maybe you could describe that and whether you have any thoughts about it.
Way west. I'm actually familiar with it. We have I don't know if people know this, but the state of Texas owns a rail line. It's called the South Orient Rail Line. It runs from the Coleman Junction, some 391 miles down to Presidio, and that runs right through my district. And one of the first projects I had coming into the legislature, they wanted to, Martifer was a Portuguese wind tower manufacturer, and they wanted to locate to my town, and they said, we'd like to put a manufacturing facility, bring steel down on the rail, and move wind towers back out. And I said, well, great, come on. They're going to spend $40 million. What's holding you up? And they said, well, the bridge over the Colorado on the rail line is this much too narrow. I said, what are you talking about? He said, it's 6 inches too narrow. For the steel can come down, but the wind towers are 6 inches too wide to go out through the terminal, or the trestle. So my first job in the legislature was trying to find $3.5 million for the state of Texas to replace the bridge over the Colorado. Well, I not only found the 3.5, I added another 7.5 to it, and we were able to replace the bridge, replace some rail and switching, and Martifer came. That rail line was in place, and so I'm telling you this story to illustrate again why we need to invest in infrastructure, because the wind tower company came, but more importantly, we upgraded the rail line, so when the fracking boom occurred in the Permian Basin, we were able to bring Minnesota white sand, fracking sand, down on the rail and move product out. There was no pipelines, there's no infrastructure in place to remove the wonderful bounty of oil being produced because of fracking, so we were able to move it out by rail. Each rail car took 4.5 trucks off the highway. So we invested in that infrastructure, and it was there available when the need came, when industry came calling, that rail line was there. Well, the terminex of that rail is in Presidio. And so as we're looking for options for trade, and I recognize that that's a kind of elusive term right now, trade with who and at what cost. But when you look at the map of North America and you see the ports in Long Beach and on the East Coast and in Houston, what you don't see is a major hub through the middle part of the breadbasket of the United States. That starts in Topolobampo and it comes up through Mexico and it hits Presidio and comes right up the South Orient Rail Line into the Fort Worth Edge region and on up to Chicago. So that's going to create a huge economic boom for Texas as that rail line is developed. And so Presidio being now situated on a major access to a port, it has rail service, it has geothermal options, and it has some water. There's a lot of groundwater out there in the Pecos region. And so I think it's particularly well suited for a big
There you
boom.
go. There's an advertisement for relocating to Presidio.
Absolutely.
And if you haven't been, you should go. You mentioned infrastructure, and Texas has done a good job building infrastructure, pipelines, towers, wire, infrastructure for moving electricity. But we also operate this competitive electric market. And I think that maybe is a little bit foreign to some people who are not from here, where if you and I wanted to form a power company, we could offer our power to the grid, and depending upon the price, we may get dispatched or not. That's one of the things that really has helped out wind and solar because they're zero marginal cost, and nuclear as well. As we talk about geothermal and its role in supplying, the price may be slightly high at the moment, but we think with scale it'll come down. How do you and your colleagues, do you still like this competitive electric market that we have, or is there some tweaks that some of your colleagues think need to be done?
Well, I'm a big proponent of the free market system. When we deregulated the electric market here in Texas, we put some safeguards in place, but basically the idea was to take our hands off and see if the training wheels would allow this baby to live and progress, and I think it has. It is maturing. Then we hit Winter Storm Uri, and we started having problems about reliability. A lot of what Uri created was not lack of planning. It was just that event was so immense and so widespread that it just showed all the faults in the system. Well, we've made some changes. We've made a lot of structural changes, including investing $5 billion into incentivizing new dispatchable generation. We've done that. All that money is trying to be subscribed right now. In fact, it's oversubscribed. The question becomes, do we invest any more money in that? Or do we sit back and let the markets decide, have we done the right thing? I'm still a believer in letting the market forces work. Let them decide based on parameters that the legislature gives them, but let the market adjust to what we've done, the changes we've made since Uri, and the money we're putting into the process. Let's let that work, as opposed to throwing the baby out with the bathwater and saying we're going to re-regulate.
Well, as one of my predecessors on the commission said, the market on its worst day is better than government fiat on its best day.
Absolutely. Amen.
And I think that is generally true. Winter Storm Uri caused people to wonder about our market design. And as you can imagine, I got a lot of incoming calls. You got a lot of incoming calls. I didn't take any of them. Finally, I took one from a friend who had become a reporter, and he asked me one question: who's to blame for Winter Storm Uri? And I said, Mother Nature. That's who's to blame. Let's don't blame ERCOT or the PUC or our market structure. And we have made some adjustments, and you and I have talked about perhaps tweaking a little bit so that geothermal can participate in some of these low interest loans. Last session, as you recall, we were able to pass 3 geothermal bills with almost total bipartisan support. In fact, I think there was one no vote in the Senate, and after we found out who it was, we went back and talked to them again, and they said, oh, I didn't quite understand that. All right, I'm on your team. This is really rare in the energy space to have bipartisan support. Why do you think that's the case, and do you think that'll continue in the Texas legislature?
I do think it's the case. We've got some wonderful members from the Valley who know about the technology. There's some places along the Gulf Coast that are particularly well suited for geothermal exploration and development. Certainly out in my part of the region, we understand the technology. I'm familiar with hot rocks. They exist not only below the surface, but upon the surface.
Right. Yeah.
And so I just think you have widespread acceptance because, one, it's environmentally safe. There's some protections, of course, that need to be in place, but for the most part, it's well received by the environmental community. I think it's well received by the oil and gas community because of the technology deployed in the development of the resources. So again, it's scalable, it's dispatchable, it's reliable, it's all the things we're looking for as policymakers.
As you talk to your constituents back home, what energy conversations do they have with you? Is it about affordability? Is it about reliability? Is it about cleanliness, or is it all the above?
It's all the above. Mostly about affordability, but it's when they see their bills each month, and naturally so. That's what they see. Of course, they see their use part, and then they see their total bill, which includes distribution costs and socialized costs with transmission, et cetera. So it's a difficult conversation to have from time to time, but anybody that believes that energy should be cheap is a great objective to have, but in practicality it takes money and resources to develop that energy to every part of Texas.
Well, you and I have been around this long enough to think about the stages that we've had of the conversation here in Texas. In the beginning, back in 2002, Deregulation was all about making it cheaper, giving the customer the right to choose, requiring generators to compete against each other. We had just come off of the building of the South Texas nuclear project, which was supposed to cost $600,000. It cost, or $6 million. It cost like $600 million, which is cheap today, right? And suddenly the focus was dereg is going to bring down cost. Then we embarked upon the CREZ lines and diversifying our portfolio. We added wind and solar, so that made it clean. And then Winter Storm Uri came along, and suddenly we thought it has to be reliable. And historically, we've told people, I can give you 2 out of 3 of these, but I can't give you all 3. I think we're getting to the point maybe where we can do all 3.
I think we can. We got to keep focus on all the above. We cannot have our energy generating resources competing against one another. Every part of the portfolio needs to stand on its own and to be added as a piece to the puzzle to fix the energy needs of this growing state.
All the above and below. Final statement, Chairman, if there's a lot of people here that are not from Texas, if you were going to encourage them to move here and explore being part of the energy space, what would you tell them?
Well, I'd say come on. I mean, but come with your ideas, come with your understanding that we've got challenges here. We've got challenges of water. This is a session of water. If we don't fix our water needs, then Texas is going to be limited. From an oil and gas standpoint, we've got to fix how we handle produced water. Clearly, we have seismicity issues. Produced water is a byproduct of oil and gas drilling operations. We've got to find a place to put it without causing other issues. And then how do it makes no sense to me to spend millions of dollars to lift water, dinosaur water as I call it, 10,000 feet below the surface, bring it to the surface, simply strip out the oil and gas associated with it, and then re-inject it back into the ground. It makes no sense to me. We've got to figure out how to use it.
So this will be the greatest place on planet Earth if you want to be part of the energy transition and part of the energy tech landscape. Come to Texas. Thank you, Chairman.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.